Did you know Stanley Kubrick's The Shining had an even more horrific ending originally? Whilst the hospital scene cut from early prints shortly after release is well covered, there was an even more drastically different finale planned at initial development. The early outlines of the story had all the Torrances damned to die gruesomely at the Overlook, due to a twist involving the hotel's chef, Halloran. From the start of the film's development process, Kubrick and screenwriter Diane Johnson were keen to diverge from the original Stephen King novel's conclusion. The book ends with Jack Torrance briefly regaining control of his senses, before the hotel finishes him off. It buys enough time for his family to escape, and the Overlook subsequently explodes. As detailed in Lee Unkrich and J.W. Rinzler's terrific book on the making of the film, after extended back and forth about how to adapt the novel, Kubrick and Johnson decided they wanted to change the book's ending. Indeed, the first full-length outline they produced on August 1st, 1977, proposes a very different conclusion. In the pair's new finale, Wendy shoots a crazed Jack, or broadly injures him somehow. Kubrick still wasn't entirely sure on how it would happen. An injured Jack then pursues her through the hotel, and to be honest, up until this point, it does actually sound quite similar to what eventually played out in cinemas. However, when Chef Halloran turns up at the hotel to save Wendy and Danny, this is where things take a much darker turn. Halloran takes a terrific blow to the head from Jack and is knocked unconscious, but the effort to attack Halloran leaves Jack vulnerable, and Wendy manages to kill him. After she has killed Jack, Wendy goes off for Danny, leaving Halloran alone. Suddenly, Grady, the ghostly bartender through whom the hotel has been manipulating events, steps out from behind a pillar, smiling. He walks up, surveys the scene, kneels down behind Halloran and says, "Good evening, chef." The story then cuts to a night much later, perhaps months later. Snow has filled up the reception area and lounge, blown in through broken windows. The outline describes how two forest rangers with flashlights discover the body of Halloran, who has apparently blown his brains out, and even more horrifically, the bodies of Jack, Wendy, and Danny. There are then flashbacks to the murder itself. Throughout this outline, Danny has been having visions of the feet of an attacker, never seeing their face. This flashback brings the visions full circle, with the camera panning up from the feet and revealing that the face of the killer belongs to Halloran. The outline's last scene finds the spectres of the Torrance sitting at a table, the shot described as being a photograph, except that it's real. The family are in a ballroom full of guests, watching a performance of some kind, their faces described as relaxed and intent. The camera then cuts around, and we see that they're watching the manager from the start of the film, Ullman, enter with a new caretaker, talking about the job. The camera cuts around behind Ullman, and we see that the ballroom is empty. By the end of that August and into October, Kubrick was already tinkering with this ending, suggesting multiple new possibilities. Maybe Jack and Halloran would fight it out, with Halloran killing Jack instead of Wendy. Maybe Wendy would kill Halloran and escape. Maybe, just maybe, they would even go closer to the novel. Jack and Danny have a sidekick duel, the hotel implodes, and Wendy, Danny and Halloran escape. All of these were fairly rough ideas, and seemed to be fleeting, but it seemed more possible that Wendy and Danny were going to make it out alive after all. In the next big revision drafted throughout October 1977, Kubrick and Johnson started veering more towards this possibility, with a noticeably different climax. Wendy still kills Jack, stabbing him, but then she hears the snowcat outside. Expecting a rescue, she goes to the door, but finds that no one's there. As the new danger dawns on her, she goes off to hunt for Danny, who she realises is on his own. The danger in question is of course Halloran, who is now under the influence of the hotel as soon as he arrives. He's described as the monstrous and threatening figure that Danny has seen in his visions. This outline is even more explicit that he's in cahoots with the hotel too, Grady instructing him on his arrival to find the child and bring him to them. The outline describes Halloran as an appalling figure of lunatic savagery, smashing at walls with an axe and making a hideous noise. During the chase, Danny and Halloran would have an ESP duel where they both can read each other's thoughts, anticipating each other's moves. When he finally finds Danny, Halloran is hit by the psychic power of his terror when Danny screams, "Stop, Dick, stop!" and gives Wendy the opportunity to finish him off. After this, Wendy and Danny manage to escape. Multiple epilogues were proposed for this draft, including ones with captions to explain what happened to the characters, and a more familiar one, where the camera pans to a scrapbook and onto a photo of Jack at a ballroom party in 1919. Another even extended this, with an unseen man's hands closing the scrapbook and taking it away. This outline again shows that the story was a fluid, ever-changing work in progress, and if there was one thing that Kubrick was coming back to over and over again, it was getting the ending perfect. The turning point towards the ending we all know occurred in tandem with the idea of incorporating the hedge maze. The maze was an idea that Kubrick had last minute, as sets were already being built. Johnson described it as very much the last thing in the process. In a 1980 Washington Post article, Kubrick is quoted as stating that he and Johnson had decided they needed an ending that was ingenious, that had visual potential, and so they hit upon the idea of the hedge maze in which Jack Torrance would get lost. He also acknowledged that the ending may have suggested itself from scenes he'd cut from King's novel, where animal topiary comes to life to terrorise Danny, which Kubrick had cut for fears it wouldn't work on film. We see the appearance of the maze in the early 1978 draft of the script. After a pursuit in the maze, Jack follows the wrong footsteps in the snow, getting lost. However, in this draft, Danny is advised by Tony to break the maze's lights to finish off the job, trapping Jack in darkness. Jack is later seen frozen to death on a bench. It's also notable in this one that Halloran survives, helping Wendy and Danny to escape, amongst many other small details that differ from the final cut. Indeed, the granular details of the sequence and the finale still remained in flux right up until filming. Subsequent drafts added features like Danny intentionally creating the footsteps to mislead Jack, and took things out such as breaking the lights, which Kubrick dismissed as unnecessarily complicated. Even with the maze in place though, there was still one element that troubled Kubrick during production. He was making a horror film with very little violence or death. To solve this, a decision was made, and Halloran's fate was sealed. In a memo made towards the end of September 1978, Kubrick outlined how Halloran's rescue attempt would fail, as Jack rushes up to Halloran with an axe and kills him, blood splattering every place. Though several other bits of fiddling with the ending would take place over the following months of production and post, including the aforementioned coda in the hospital, the main body of it stayed the same from then. Halloran was murdered, Danny and Wendy escaped, and Jack froze to death in the maze, and in time. One person who seemed relieved with the change was the author of the original novel, Stephen King. In a 1978 interview with Cinefantastique, King didn't outright say he disliked the initial idea of Halloran killing the family, but there was definitely more than a little shade at Kubrick's philosophy behind it. On the discussions he and Kubrick had had, King said, "The impression I got from our conversation is that Kubrick does not believe in life after death, yet he thought that any vein of the supernatural story, whether it's horrifying or whether it's pleasant, is inherently optimistic because it points towards the possible survival of the spirit. And I told him, that's all very good as a philosophy, but when an audience is brought face to face with the slaughter of characters that they care about, then they will cry for your head once they go out of the theatre." King's sceptical thoughts on the finished film are well documented, to put it mildly, but it's interesting to see how early in the process he was voicing them, and how clear from the get-go the differences between his and Kubrick's visions were. Personally, though the brutal, bloody ending of Halloran slaughtering the Torrances would have given the film a memorable, bleak conclusion, there is an unbeatable poetic irony to Jack getting literally and figuratively frozen in time. It works as an elegant conclusion to the film's themes regarding generational evil. The way in which the figure of the contemporary American father can be shaped by it, Jack unconsciously trapping himself in both his own and the hotel's self-perpetuating cycle of violence forever, a place where morbidly, he feels most at home. Decentering Jack at the last minute, and essentially making the hotel the key villain, to me detracts from the film's potent commentary on the violence underpinning the American patriarch. The drunken, resentful beast in Jack is liberated and nurtured by the hotel, but he's not created by it. This is a story of a sickness of one particular man, the hotel acting as a potent amplifier for him. Throwing possessed Halloran into the mix just dilutes that idea, as exciting as the twist would have been on a plot level. Instead, the creatives refocused their eyes on the thematic core of their film, and gave their lead character the punishment he unwittingly craved. Though Jack may have been lost in the maze, Kubrick and Johnson had found their perfect ending.